I sat across from Lydia in the Aspen room, golden light glinting off her perfect hair. But her words cut like a knife. Mom, Thanksgiving should be small this year. It's already crowded, and adding, you would be tough. My heart clenched. Tough, because I wasn't polished enough for her elite table. Lydia, the daughter I raised, had just cast me out of her family for not fitting in with talk of Tuscan villas or fine wine. You make people uncomfortable, she said, her smile cold like she was firing an employee. I stood clutching my purse, my voice trembling but firm. You're right, Lydia. I don't belong here. I walked out, leaving her stunned gaze behind my heart, blazing not with pain, but with a resolve I didn't know I had. Would I stay the forgotten mother, or was this the moment I reclaimed myself? That moment storming out of the Aspen room wasn't just a fight, it lit a fire in me. I'm Elaine Harper, 60, a retired librarian living quietly in a small Boulder, Colorado apartment. For 5 years, I hid millions left by my husband, choosing a simple life to teach my kids, Lydia and Michael, the value of self-reliance. I thought I was building their strength, but Lydia saw me as a burden too basic for her polished world. Her rejection that day, telling me I didn't belong at her Thanksgiving table, shattered something in me, but it also sparked a journey. From Boulder's shadows to Central America's villages, I found a purpose that redefined my worth. This is the story of how I learned to love myself again, and maybe, just maybe, how I found a path to forgiveness. I've spent the last 5 years perfecting the art of being invisible. My one-bedroom apartment in Boulder, Colorado, smells faintly of old books and chamomile tea, the kind of place where a retired librarian like me blends into the walls. Worn furniture, thrift store curtains, a coffee maker that's outlived 2 cars. I chose this life. Not because I had to, but because I wanted my kids, Lydia and Michael, to build their own paths without leaning on the wealth their father left behind. After John died, I tucked away his life insurance and investments, millions I swore I'd never touch, and learned to live on Social Security and a modest pension. Every morning, I'd walk past Boulder's trendy cafes, their windows glowing with laughter and overpriced lattes, and feel like a ghost. My gray cardigans and sensible shoes screamed forgettable, and I let them. I'd clip coupons men's socks, drive a rattling 2010 Toyota that prayed its way through every ignition. But it wasn't about deprivation, it was about freedom. Freedom from the expectations that came with money, the kind that turned my late husband's colleagues into strangers after his funeral. I thought I was teaching my kids resilience, character, the value of earning their way. Lydia, though, saw something else. To her, I wasn't a mother who'd chosen modesty. I was a relic, a woman who couldn't keep up with her glittering life. And maybe I let her believe it too long. Maybe I hid too well. As I sat in my quiet apartment, sorting through library books I'd never own, I'd wonder if I'd lost more than I'd gained. My son Michael called from Seattle now, and then his voice warm but distant. But Lydia, she was right here in Boulder, and yet a universe away. Lydia Bennett. My daughter is a force of nature. At 35, she's the CEO of a tech startup that's reshaped how people connect online. Her face has graced Boulder's business magazines, her name whispered in boardrooms. I'd watch her from afar, pride swelling in my chest like a tide. She inherited her father's sharp mind, his knack for turning ideas into empires. But where John had a warmth that drew people close, Lydia's success is a polished blade, dazzling but cutting. Her life is a curated masterpiece, a sleek house in Boulder's foothills, 2 kids, Sophie, 15, and Liam, 13, in private schools, a husband, Ryan, who designs eco-friendly buildings for the elite. Their world is dinner parties, with venture capitalists, ski trips to Vail, charity galas, where the wine costs more than my monthly rent. I'd get glimpses of it through Sophie's texts or Lydia's rare invitations, always laced with a subtle expectation that I'd marvel at her achievements. And I did. How could I not? She'd built something extraordinary without a dime of her father's money. But every call, every visit carried a shadow. Lydia's eyes would linger on my faded coat, my scuffed shoes, her smile tightening, as if my presence dimmed her shine. I'd catch her glancing at Ryan's parents, retired surgeons, with a penthouse in Denver, and sense her measuring me against them. I wasn't the mother she wanted to show off, not anymore. Once I overheard her tell Ryan I was simpler now. As if grief and modesty had stripped me of substance. It stung, but I swallowed it, telling myself she'd understand one day, that she'd see the love behind my choices. Until that lunch invitation came, her voice clipped and formal over the phone. "We need to talk about family matters, Mom." The Aspen Room, Friday 1 p.m. My stomach twisted. Lydia's family matters never meant good news. The phone call came on a Tuesday morning, my hands still damp from washing dishes in my tiny sink. Lydia's name flashed on the screen, and I froze, the familiar knot in my chest tightening. Her calls were rare, always purposeful, like a CEO scheduling a performance review. "Mom, we need to discuss some important family matters," she said, her voice smooth, but edged with something I couldn't place. "Can you meet me at the Aspen Room on Friday 1 o'clock? I mumbled a yes, my mind already racing. Family matters? The phrase echoed like a warning bell, each syllable heavy, with the memory of past conversations, her gentle lectures about my choices, her suggestions that I move to a better apartment, as if my life embarrassed her. I set the phone down and stared out my window at Boulder's flatirons, their rugged peaks steady against the October sky. What did she want this time? To critique my wardrobe again? To offer another pity-driven invitation to a family event I'd feel out of place at? I thought of Sophie and Liam, my grandkids, their bright faces, the only reason I still showed up to Lydia's carefully curated gatherings. But even their warmth couldn't erase the way Lydia's eyes would flicker with impatience when I declined her offers to help me. Help, as if I were a problem to be fixed. For 3 days, I turned her words over in my mind, each repetition adding a layer of dread. I'd raised Lydia to be strong, independent, to value more than material things. But somewhere along the way, she'd learned to see me as less relevant, less capable, less worthy of her time. As Friday loomed, I caught myself pacing my apartment, my fingers brushing the worn leather purse I'd carried for years. Inside a business card I hadn't touched in a decade, Edward Langston Wealth Management, a relic from the life I'd walked away from. I didn't know why I kept it, but it felt like a lifeline now, a reminder that I wasn't as powerless as Lydia thought. Friday morning, I stood in front of my bedroom mirror, smoothing the silk blouse I'd bought on clearance at a Boulder consignment shop. It was the most expensive thing I owned, a deep blue that made my gray eyes look alive, but it felt like a costume. At 60, I was used to cardigans and flats clothes that let me fade into the background. Today, though, I was stepping into Lydia's world, the Aspen Room where every detail screamed wealth. I tugged at the blouse, my reflection, a stranger who didn't belong in either my life or hers. I'd spent years making myself small, not just for Lydia and Michael, but for myself. After John's death, the world of country clubs and financial advisors felt hollow, a betrayal of the love we'd built. So I hid our wealth, millions, in investments, in insurance, and chose a life that felt honest. I thought it would teach my kids to value grit over gold. But as I slipped on my best shoes, scuffed but polished, I wondered if I'd only taught Lydia to judge me. My hands shook as I packed my purse, $42 in cash, a debit card, tied to an account I kept nearly empty, and that business card, its edges soft from years behind my driver's license. Edward Langston's name stared back at me, a ghost from a time when I'd felt secure, not scrutinized. I drove my creaking Toyota through Boulder's bustling streets, past yoga studios and artisanal bakeries, my heart pounding. I parked 3 blocks from the Aspen Room to avoid the valet's pitying glance, feeding quarters into a meter like a ritual. As I walked toward the restaurant, the autumn wind bit at my cheeks, but I felt something else, a flicker of defiance. Lydia might see me as a failure, but I'd chosen this life. I'd chosen to let her shine without my shadow. And yet standing outside the Aspen Room's glass doors, watching women in designer coats glide past, I couldn't shake the fear that I was about to be weighed and found wanting. The Aspen Room smelled of fresh herbs and money, its floor-to-ceiling windows catching Boulder's golden afternoon light. I spotted Lydia immediately, her blonde hair gleaming like a crown, her tailored blazer whispering success. She sat at a central table where every passing waiter and patron could note her presence. At 35, she carried herself like she owned the room, and maybe she did. I smoothed my clearance rack blouse, my heart thudding as I crossed the polished floor, feeling every eye catalog my imperfections. "Mom, you made it," Lydia said, rising for a quick hug that felt more like a formality, her perfume sharp and expensive. Her smile was warm enough for onlookers, but her pause before, "You look nice," carried a silent inventory. My scuffed shoes, my unmanicured hands, the absence of jewelry I'd sold to keep my modest life afloat. I settled across from her, my chair creaking faintly, and tried to match her composure. She was already scanning the wine list, her fingers tapping that old childhood rhythm in patience. I realized now her tell when something unpleasant was coming. "I ordered the tasting menu," she said, her voice light but deliberate. "I know you've been careful with money lately." The words landed like a velvet-wrapped blade, her smile never wavering. I nodded, my face a practiced mask honed from years of swallowing her subtle jabs. The sommelier appeared, recommending wines that cost more than my weekly groceries, and Lydia nodded as if she'd memorized the vineyard's history. I watched her, my pride in her brilliance warring with the ache of her judgment. Then it came. "About Thanksgiving," she began, leaning forward, her tone shifting to that careful cadence she used for tricky negotiations. "Ryan and I think it should be smaller this year. Sophie and Liam have their friends. Ryan's parents are coming from Denver, and it's already 9 people." She let the number hang, her eyes steady, but not meeting mine. 9 people, everyone but me. My hands trembled under the table, and I clasped them tight, the cold spreading through my chest like frost. Adding one more would be overwhelming, I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Lydia's smile flickered a crack in her perfect facade. "It's not personal, Mom. It's just Ryan's parents are used to a certain vibe. They talk business travel, big ideas. And lately you've seemed disconnected. Like last Christmas, when Ryan's mom talked about their Tuscany villa. You didn't say much, and it felt awkward. Awkward. I remember that night excusing myself to the bathroom, staring at my reflection, willing myself not to crumble, as Ryan's mother tossed out figures, $15,000 for a month abroad, such a steal. I'd been silent, not from disinterest, but from the weight of knowing I hadn't taken a trip in years. Lydia saw my silence as failure, not restraint. The first course arrived, a delicate tower of greens I couldn't name. I set my fork down, the fire in my chest flaring. "So I'm not welcome because I can't keep up with villa talk." Lydia's eyes widened, but she didn't answer. She didn't need to. I looked at Lydia across the table, her face a mask of practiced calm, and felt something snap inside me. Not the slow crack of sadness I'd grown used to, but a clean, white-hot anger that burned through years of shame. For 5 years, I'd let her see me as less polished, less successful, less worthy because I thought it would make her stronger. But this, telling me I didn't belong at her Thanksgiving table because I couldn't match her in-laws' chatter about Tuscan villas. This was too much. My hands stopped trembling. I reached for my purse, the worn leather grounding me, and stood, my legs steadier than they'd been in months. I understand perfectly, I said, my voice low but clear, cutting through the hum of the Aspen room. Lydia's eyes widened, her composure slipping. Mom, please don't make this dramatic, she said, her tone still measured, as if she could negotiate her way out of this moment. Dramatic, I repeated the word, tasting bitter. You just told me I'm not good enough for your family because I don't fit your vibe. That's not dramatic, Lydia. It's personal. Her mouth opened, then closed, and for the first time I saw a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. I didn't wait for her to recover. Don't worry about the bill, I added, turning toward the door. I'm sure you can handle it with your social fluency. I walked out, past the startled hostess, past the curious glances of Boulder's elite, sipping their overpriced wine. The autumn air hit me like a slap, but I didn't falter. My heart pounded not with fear or humiliation, but with something I hadn't felt in years: purpose. For too long, I'd apologized for existing, shrinking myself to fit Lydia's vision of who I should be. I'd let her believe I was poor, irrelevant, a shadow of the mother who'd raised her. But I wasn't that woman, not anymore. As I reached my rattling Toyota 3 blocks away, where the meters were cheap, I let myself shake. Not from weakness, but from the realization that I'd been carrying her judgment like a weight I could finally set down. I slid into the driver's seat, my hands gripping the wheel, and thought of the business card tucked in my purse. Edward Langston Wealth Management. A piece of my past I'd buried but never forgotten. That night in my quiet apartment, I sat at my small kitchen table, a cold cup of tea beside me. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was alive with possibility. I'd spent 5 years hiding my strength to teach my children resilience, but Lydia had learned the wrong lesson. She'd learned to measure worth by wealth, to dismiss anyone who didn't shine as brightly as she did. And I was done letting her define me. I picked up my phone, my fingers steady, and dialed a number I hadn't called in a decade. It was time to stop hiding. I sat at my kitchen table, the business card's faded ink staring up at me like a challenge. Edward Langston Wealth Management. 10 years ago, I tucked it behind my driver's license, a relic from a life I'd chosen to leave behind. Back when John was alive, we'd walk into Edward's Boulder office feeling untouchable, our future secured by investments and insurance that grew quietly while we raised our kids. After John's death, I'd turn my back on that world, hiding millions to live modestly, to teach Lydia and Michael the value of earning their own way. But now, that card felt like a key to a door I'd locked too long. I traced its edges, my tea long cold. Lydia's words from the Aspen room echoed disconnected, awkward, not good enough. She thought I was poor, a faded librarian scraping by, and I'd let her. I'd wanted her to build her tech empire, without my shadow, to know pride in her own work. But instead, she'd learned to judge me, to see my thrift store clothes and rattling car as proof I didn't belong. The irony burned. I'd hidden my wealth to give her freedom, and she'd used it to push me away. I thought of Sophie and Liam, my grandkids, their faces bright with uncomplicated love. They didn't care about my bank account, but Lydia did. And that hurt more than I could bear. For 5 years, I'd lived small clipping coupons, mending socks, pretending I had no choice. But I had millions I'd saved for a purpose I hadn't yet found. Until now. I picked up my phone, my fingers steady despite the fire in my chest. Edward's office line rang twice before a familiar voice answered. Langston and Associates, this is Margaret. I took a breath, the words coming easier than I expected. Hello, Margaret. This is Elaine Harper. I'd like to speak with Edward about accessing my accounts. As I waited, my eyes drifted to my apartment's worn walls, the life I'd built to disappear. I'd thought modesty would teach Lydia values, but it had only taught her shame. I was done hiding. Whatever came next, it wouldn't be about proving myself to her. It would be about proving to myself that I was more than the mother she'd dismissed. The line clicked, and Edward's warm voice came through. "Elaine, it's been too long." I smiled, gripping the card like a lifeline. "It has, and I'm ready to change that." The next morning, I walked into Edward Langston's Boulder office, the glass doors reflecting a woman I barely recognized. Not the Elaine Harper who'd spent 5 years fading into thrift store cardigans, but someone sharper, steadier, ready to reclaim what she'd hidden. The marble floors and soft jazz hadn't changed since John and I last visited, but I had. Edward's receptionist, Margaret, gave me a polite smile that wavered when she noted my modest coat. I could almost hear her thoughts. Is this woman worth our time? It reminded me of Lydia's glance at the Aspen room, and instead of shrinking, I stood taller. Edward greeted me in his corner office, his silver hair catching the light, the river sparkling beyond his window. "Elaine," he said, his handshake firm, but his eyes curious. "It's been too long. How are you holding up?" I settled into a leather chair, the scent of his cologne stirring memories of easier days. "Better than most people think," I said, my voice carrying a confidence I hadn't felt in years. He raised an eyebrow, but stayed quiet, waiting. "I want to make a donation," I said, the words deliberate, rehearsed through a sleepless night. $3 million to the Central American Youth Education Fund. Edward's pen froze midair, his professional calm cracking into genuine surprise. The silence stretched, broken only by the faint hum of traffic below. $3 million, he repeated, setting the pen down. "That's significant. It's nearly half your liquid assets, Elaine. May I ask what's driving this?" I leaned forward, my hand steady on his mahogany desk. "Yesterday, my daughter told me I wasn't welcome at her Thanksgiving table because I don't fit with her successful in-laws. She's ashamed of me, Edward, of the poor mother she thinks I am." His face softened, but I pressed on. "I've spent 5 years living like I had nothing, thinking it would teach Lydia and Michael to value character over money. But Lydia learned to dismiss anyone who can't talk about private jets and charity boards. I was wrong to hide the truth." Edward studied me, his expression unreadable. "And this donation, is it a response to her?" I shook my head. "It's for me, for kids in Guatemala, Honduras, Costa Rica, who don't have the luxury of judging worth by wealth. They need schools, books, a chance to dream. I want to give them that, and I want the world to know it was me." His lips twitched into a smile, not the polished one he used with clients, but something real. "John always said you had steel under that quiet exterior." We spent the next hour reviewing my accounts, John's life insurance, our investments numbers, that still startled me after years of canned soup and library books. By the time I left, the wheels were turning. In 2 weeks, my donation would be announced, a press conference, planned with my name front and center. As I stepped into Boulder's crisp air, I felt lighter. Not because I'd given away millions, but because I'd stopped apologizing for who I was. The Guatemala City airport was a whirlwind of color and sound, vendors shouting in Spanish, families embracing the air thick with coffee and diesel. After 18 hours of travel, I should have been exhausted, but my heart raced with something new anticipation. I'd landed in a world far from Boulder's polished streets, and for the first time in years, I felt awake. Clara Mendoza, a coordinator from the Central American Youth Education Fund, met me at customs, her warm smile cutting through the chaos. At 55, she had the kind of energy that came from a life spent building something real. Her practical braid in sturdy boots, a stark contrast to Lydia's manicured world. "Elaine, welcome," Clara said, shouldering my single carry-on bag like it weighed nothing. "Ready to see what your donation's doing?" I nodded, my throat tight with emotion. We drove through crowded streets, past tin-roofed homes and children kicking makeshift soccer balls, to a small education center in a neighborhood Lydia would have called rough. But to me, it was alive, vibrant, unapologetic, full of people who didn't hide, who they were. The center was a simple building, its walls painted with murals of books and stars. Inside, kids aged 6 to 16 sat at wooden desks, their faces bright with focus, as they practiced reading or math. Clara introduced me to Dr. Sophia Reyes, the program director, a wiry woman with fierce eyes and a handshake that meant business. "Your $3 million is funding this center for 5 years," Sophia said, gesturing to new textbooks and laptops. "But we need more than money. You said you wanted to help in person. Let's put you to work." And within an hour, I was sitting with a group of 10-year-olds, helping them sound out English words. A girl named Maria, her braids swinging, as she leaned over her notebook, grinned when she nailed apple. Her eyes sparkled with pride, not judgment, and I felt a warmth I hadn't known I'd been missing. These kids didn't care about my thrift store clothes or my lack of villa stories. They saw me, really saw me, and it was like oxygen after years of holding my breath. That night, in a sparse volunteer dorm, I lay on a cot, the hum of cicadas outside my window. I thought of Lydia, probably sipping wine in her Boulder mansion, oblivious to the life I'd just stepped into. For 5 years, I'd let her define my worth, shrinking to fit her expectations. But here, with Maria's laughter still echoing in my mind, I was needed, not tolerated. I wasn't Elaine, the embarrassing mother. I was Elaine, the woman who'd given these kids a chance. As I drifted to sleep, I realized I hadn't thought about Lydia's judgment all day. For the first time in too long, I was exactly where I belonged, and it felt like coming home. Every morning in Guatemala, I woke to the chatter of kids outside the education center, their voices a melody of hope that drowned out the ache I'd carried from Boulder. Maria became my shadow, her small hand slipping into mine as we walked to class. At 10, she'd already known hunger, her family scraping by in a one-room home, but her smile was a force, bright, unyielding, like she'd decided the world couldn't dim her. "Miss Elaine," she'd say, practicing her English, "you teach me, I teach you." And she did. She taught me how to laugh without guarding my heart, how to accept a gift, a woven bracelet, a shy hug, without questioning my worth. I spent my days helping kids like Maria, with reading and math, their gratitude wrapping around me like a warm blanket. A boy named Carlos, 12, would stay late to practice multiplication, his brow furrowed until he got it right, then beam like he'd conquered a mountain. These kids didn't care that I drove a beat-up Toyota or skipped fancy vacations. They saw my time, my patience as treasures, and it healed something in me I hadn't known was broken. In Boulder, I'd been invisible, a mother Lydia tucked away like an old photo. Here I was seen, and it made me wonder why I'd ever let her judgment define me. One afternoon, as I helped Maria write a sentence, "I want to be a teacher," I thought of Sophie and Liam, my grandkids. They'd send me texts sometimes, full of emojis and questions about my day, but Lydia's shadow always loomed. She'd made me feel like a burden, someone who dulled her family's shine. But Maria, she'd tug my sleeve, eager to show me her work, and I'd feel like the most important person in the room. The contrast hit hard. My own daughter had dismissed me for not fitting her world, while these kids with so little welcomed me into theirs without a second thought. At night, I'd sit on the center's rooftop, the stars brighter than any Boulder sky, and write in a journal I'd started. Day 12. Maria read a full page today. Carlos hugged me when he solved a math problem. I haven't felt this alive in years. I thought of Lydia's polished life, her tech empire, her perfect house, and realized I didn't envy it. Her success was real, but it came with a cost. She'd forgotten how to value people who didn't reflect her status. I'd raised her to be strong, but somewhere I'd failed to teach her kindness. As I folded away my journal, a breeze carried the scent of street food and dust. I wasn't just helping these kids, they were saving me, showing me a purpose I'd buried under years of self-doubt. For the first time, I wasn't apologizing for existing. I was building something real, and no one, not even Lydia, could take that away. 2 weeks into my time in Guatemala, my phone buzzed at dawn, pulling me from a dream of Maria's laughter. The screen showed Lydia's name, and my stomach twisted, the old tightness creeping back. I was sitting on my cot in the volunteer dorm, the air heavy with morning humidity, and I let it ring 4 times before answering. "Hello, Lydia," I said, my voice steady, though my heart wasn't. "Mom," she said, her tone high and frayed, not the polished CEO I knew. "I just saw the news. Some morning show said Elaine Harper donated $3 million to a kids' charity in Central America. Please tell me that's not you." The words carried a plea, as if she needed me to stay the poor, predictable mother she'd dismissed. I could hear her breathing quick and shallow, like she was unraveling. "It's me," I said simply, leaning against the dorm's rough wall. Silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. When she spoke again, her voice was a whisper. "3 million, Mom. Where how? You've had this money all along." I pictured her in her Boulder kitchen, granite counters, gleaming her perfect life, cracking under the weight of this truth. "Yes," I said. "The whole time I've been living in that tiny apartment, driving that old car, saying no to your fancy dinners." I didn't soften it. She needed to feel the edges of her mistake. "Why?" she asked, almost a wail. "Why let me think you were struggling? Why let me worry about you when you had millions?" The question stung, but it also lit something in me, clarity sharp and clean. "I wanted you and Michael to build your own lives," I said, my voice low but firm. "I thought if you knew about the money, you'd lean on it instead of yourselves. I was proud of your success, Lydia, but I never thought you'd measure my worth by what I didn't show." Her sharp intake of breath told me I'd hit a nerve. I pressed on. "You told me I didn't belong at your table because I couldn't talk about villas or charity boards. You were ashamed of me. What am I supposed to think about that?" "I wasn't ashamed," she said, but her voice cracked uncertain. I thought you'd feel out of place." I closed my eyes, the memory of the Aspen room burning. "Or you thought I'd embarrass you," I said. Another silence, heavier this time. "Mom, can we talk in person? Please come home." "I can't," I said, glancing out the window at kids gathering for breakfast, their chatter a reminder of why I was here. "I'm staying in Central America for 3 months, working with the kids my donations helping." 3 months? Her voice broke. "What about Thanksgiving, Christmas?" The question revealed her priorities, not my safety, but her plans. "You already decided I wasn't welcome," I said. "I'm where I'm needed now." I hung up before she could respond, my hand steady. Outside, Maria waved, calling me to join her. Lydia's shock didn't matter here. For the first time, I was choosing myself. A month after Guatemala, I arrived in Tegucigalpa, Honduras. The city's chaotic energy, a stark contrast to Boulder's manicured calm. The Central American Youth Education Fund had sent me to a rural school project, a half-built structure of cinder blocks and hope. The air smelled of dust and mangoes, and kids ran barefoot through the yard, their laughter cutting through the hum of construction. I was there to teach English to teenagers, kids who worked odd jobs to support their families, but dreamed of college. Their hunger for learning lit something in me I thought I'd lost. My days started at dawn, walking dirt paths to the school with a thermos of coffee and a notebook. I'd sit with students like Juan 16, whose calloused hands spoke of long hours, hauling fruit crates, but whose eyes burned with ambition. "Miss Elaine," he'd say, practicing phrases, "I want to be an engineer." I'd help him craft sentences, correct his grammar, and watch his confidence grow. Unlike Lydia's world, where worth was measured in status, these kids valued every word I taught, every moment I gave. Their gratitude wasn't polite. It was fierce, like they knew each lesson was a step toward a life they could barely imagine. One afternoon, as I helped a girl named Rosa write a letter to a scholarship program, I thought of Lydia. She'd built a tech empire, her name on magazine covers, but she'd forgotten how to see people like Juan and Rosa, people who fought for every chance. I'd raised her to be driven, but I hadn't taught her to value the kind of resilience I saw here. Rosa's letter, full of dreams to become a doctor, reminded me of Sophie, my granddaughter, who'd once told me she wanted to help people. But Lydia's influence loomed, steering Sophie toward practical goals, like business or law. I wondered if I'd failed them both by hiding my strength too long. At night, I'd sit under a tin roof, rain tapping above, and write in my journal. Day 35, Juan read a full paragraph today. Rosa cried when I said her letter was perfect. I feel like I'm rebuilding myself alongside this school. The work was hard, sweaty, dusty, my hands blistered from carrying supplies, but it was honest. In Boulder, I'd been a ghost apologizing for my existence. Here I was, a teacher, a builder, someone who mattered. I thought of Lydia's call, her shock at my donation, her plea to come home. She wanted the mother she'd dismissed, but I wasn't that woman anymore. These kids didn't care about my bank account or my clearance rack clothes. They cared that I showed up, and that was enough. As I watched Juan practice his vocabulary under a flickering bulb, I realized I wasn't just giving them a future. They were giving me one too. For the first time in years, I wasn't defined by Lydia's judgment. I was defined by what I built, and it felt like freedom. In Honduras, my phone rarely buzzed, service was spotty, and I'd grown used to the quiet. But one evening, as I sat on the school steps, the sunset painting, the hills gold, a message lit up my screen. It was from an unknown number, and my heart skipped when I read it. "Grandma, it's Sophie. Mom gave me your number. Are you okay? I miss you." My granddaughter, 15. Her words simple, but heavy with care. I stared at the text, the dust of the day still on my hands, and felt a pang I hadn't expected. Sophie and Liam were the bright spots in my Boulder life. Their hugs at awkward family dinners, a reminder of love that didn't come with conditions. But Lydia's influence kept us at arm's length. My visits were scheduled, my role reduced to a polite guest. I pictured Sophie, now probably in her room, her phone glowing as she typed, worried about the grandmother she barely knew. Her message went on, "Mom's been weird since you left. She cries a lot, but won't say why. Liam thinks you fought. Did you?" The directness of her words, free of Lydia's calculated edges, hit me hard. I thought of Juan and Rosa, the kids I taught here, whose honesty mirrored Sophie's. They didn't hide their struggles or their dreams, and it made me realize how much I'd missed that openness. I wanted to reply to tell Sophie I was fine, that I was helping kids who needed me, but my thumb hovered over the screen. What could I say without dragging her into the mess between me and Lydia? I set the phone down and looked at the stars, brighter than any Boulder night. Sophie's concern was real, but it stirred a question. Why hadn't Lydia reached out again? Her call after the donation news had been raw, desperate, but weeks had passed without another word. Was she waiting for me to bend, to return to the mother she could manage? I wasn't that woman anymore. Here, teaching kids who saw my worth, I'd found a strength I wouldn't trade. Later, in my small room, I typed a reply. "Hi, Sophie. I'm okay working with kids in Honduras who need help. I miss you too. Your mom and I had a disagreement, but sometimes grown-ups need time to figure things out. Tell Liam I'm thinking of him." I hit send, my heart lighter, but guarded. Sophie's love was a bridge, but Lydia would have to cross it herself. For now, I had a classroom of kids waiting, and their trust felt like the family I'd been searching for. 2 months into my journey, As I stood in a Costa Rican village, the humid air thick with the scent of rain and coffee, I felt a shift so profound it was like waking from a long sleep. I'd moved from Honduras to help build a library for the Central American Youth Education Fund, a simple structure where kids could read and dream. My hands were calloused from stacking bookshelves, my skin tanned from days under the sun, but my heart was full. A girl named Anna, 14, had just shown me her sketch of a rocket. She wanted to be an astronaut. Her pride, untainted by judgment, mirrored Maria's in Guatemala, Juan's in Honduras. These kids didn't see me as Lydia's embarrassing mother. They saw me as someone who believed in them, and it changed everything. I thought of the Aspen room. Lydia's words slicing through me, disconnected, awkward, not good enough. For years, I let her define my worth, shrinking to fit her vision of a mother who didn't belong. I'd hidden my wealth, my strength, thinking it would teach her values. But she'd learned to value status instead. Here, surrounded by kids who cherished every book, every lesson, I saw my mistake. I hadn't just hidden money, I'd hidden myself. And I was done. One evening, as I sat on a wooden bench, watching Anna and her friends read under a flickering lantern, I opened my journal. Day 62, Anna drew a rocket today. She thinks she can touch the stars, and I believe her. I'm not the woman who left Boulder. I'm not apologizing anymore. I thought of Sophie's text, her worry, her love, and Lydia's silence since that frantic call. Part of me wanted to reach out to bridge the gap, but another part, the stronger part, knew I didn't need her approval. These kids, this work, had given me a purpose Lydia couldn't take away. I remembered a conversation with Clara, the fund coordinator, under a Guatemala sky. "You're not just giving them money," she'd said. "You're giving them someone who sees their worth." That was it, the truth I'd been chasing. Worth wasn't about bank accounts or social fluency, as Lydia believed. It was about showing up, about choosing to help without expecting applause. I'd spent 5 years trying to teach Lydia that lesson by living small, but I taught her the wrong thing. Now I was teaching myself, and it felt like reclaiming a piece of my soul. As I packed my bag for the final leg of my trip, documenting the fund's impact in Costa Rica, I made a decision. I wouldn't return to Boulder as the mother Lydia had dismissed. I'd go back as Elaine Harper, the woman who'd built libraries, taught kids, and donated millions, not to prove a point, but because it was right. Lydia's shock, her regret, didn't define me anymore. Sophie and Liam deserved to know their grandmother, but Lydia would have to earn her way back into my life. The stars above the village glittered, and I felt a calm I hadn't known in years. I wasn't angry at Lydia, not anymore. I was free. Free to be the woman Anna thought I was, the woman who believed in rockets and dreams. For the first time, my worth wasn't tied to anyone else's judgment. It was mine, hard-earned and unbreakable, and I'd carry it home. I stepped off the plane in Denver, the February chill of 2025, biting through my thin jacket, a far cry from Costa Rica's humid warmth. My hands were rougher now, my hair cropped short by a village barber. But the biggest change was inside. 3 months in Central America, teaching kids, building libraries, seeing gratitude in every smile had rebuilt me. Boulder's familiar streets felt like a memory of someone else's life as I drove my old Toyota to my apartment. The key turned in the lock, and I stood in my small living room, the worn furniture unchanged. But me, I was a stranger to this quiet, diminished world. I'd been home an hour, unpacking photos of Anna and Juan, when a knock came. My heart sank. I knew who it was. Lydia stood in the doorway, her face gaunt, dark circles framing her eyes. Gone was the polished CEO. She wore jeans and a loose sweater, her hair in a messy ponytail. "Mom," she said, her voice breaking on the word. "You're back." I nodded, not stepping aside, my arms crossed. "I'm back. "I've been trying to reach you," she said, her words tumbling out. "The news, the interviews, the kids you helped, I watched it all." Her eyes searched mine, desperate for something I wasn't sure I could give. "I'm proud of you." I raised an eyebrow, the memory of the Aspen room sharp. "Proud? Or relieved? I'm not the embarrassment you thought." She flinched, tears welling, but I didn't soften. "You told me I didn't belong, Lydia, because I wasn't fluent enough for your world." "I was wrong," she said, her voice raw. "I've replayed that day 1,000 times. I've lost sleep, Mom. I've hated myself for what I said." She took a shaky breath. "I turned into someone cruel, someone who forgot what matters. I want to fix this." I studied her, looking for the manipulation I'd grown used to, but saw only vulnerability, a glimpse of the girl who'd once run to me with scraped knees. "What do you want from me?" I asked, my tone even. "The poor mother you pitied, or the wealthy one who might fit your table now?" Her tears fell freely. "I want you. The mom who raised me, who gave everything for kids she'd never met. I want to understand how I lost you." Her honesty hit me a crack in the wall I'd built. I thought of Anna's rocket sketch, Maria's bracelet, the kids who taught me worth wasn't about status. Lydia was trying, but trust wasn't that simple. I stepped aside, opening the door wider. "Come in," I said, my voice steady but not warm. "I'll tell you about the kids who showed me what gratitude looks like." She hesitated, then stepped inside her eyes, taking in my modest apartment with something new, respect maybe. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. As she sat on my worn couch, I realized I wasn't here to please her. I was here to build something new for Sophie, for Liam, for myself. Lydia sat on my couch, her hands clasped tight as I spread photos across the coffee table. Maria's grin, Juan's proud stance, Anna's rocket sketch. I told her about the kids in Central America, their dreams, their gratitude, how they'd taught me that love and purpose were the only currencies that mattered. Her eyes stayed fixed on the images, tears drying as she listened, really listened, for the first time in years. I saw glimpses of the daughter I'd raised, the one who'd once begged me to read her one more story. But I wasn't naive. One conversation didn't erase the Aspen room. "Mom," she said when I finished, her voice soft, "would you come to Thanksgiving this year? Not because you can afford it, but because we need you. Sophie and Liam need their grandmother. And I need to remember who I want to be." Her words hung between us, earnest but fragile. I thought of Sophie's texts, Liam's shy hugs, the uncomplicated love they offered. They deserved a grandmother who showed up, not one who hid behind old hurts, but Lydia. She'd have to prove she meant it. I leaned back, my hands resting on a photo of Anna. "I'll think about it," I said, my tone steady. "Not because of your table or your in-laws, but for Sophie and Liam. They're why I'd come." Lydia nodded, her face open, no trace of the CEO's polish. "That's fair," she said. "I'll show you I've changed, Mom, however long it takes." As she left, the Boulder dusk settling outside, I felt a quiet shift. Not forgiveness, not yet, but possibility. I'd spent 5 years shrinking, then 3 months rebuilding myself with kids who saw my worth. I wasn't the mother Lydia had dismissed, nor the one she now wanted back. I was Elaine, the woman who'd chosen purpose over resentment, who'd learned from Maria and Anna that worth wasn't earned through status, but through kindness. Thanksgiving was months away, but I pictured Sophie's smile, Liam's chatter, and maybe, just maybe, a seat at a table where I belonged. Not because of money, but because of who I'd become. For the first time, I didn't need Lydia's approval to feel whole. I had Central America's kids, my grandkids, and a life I'd built on my terms. That was enough. As I sit in my Boulder apartment, Anna's rocket sketch pinned to my wall. I'm not the woman who walked into the Aspen room last fall. I'm not the mother who hid her strength to teach her kids. nor the one who let Lydia's judgment define her. I'm Elaine Harper, a woman who found purpose in the laughter of kids like Maria Juan and Anna kids, who showed me that worth isn't about what you own, but what you give. Central America gave me back my heart, and I'll carry that gift forever. Looking back, I see the cost of silence. I hid my wealth, my power, thinking it would make Lydia and Michael stronger, but it built walls instead. Lydia's learning now slowly that love matters more than status, and I'm learning to meet her halfway, for Sophie, for Liam, for the family we might rebuild. But my real family stretches beyond Boulder, to the kids whose dreams I helped spark, whose gratitude taught me to stop apologizing for existing. So here's my challenge to you: find your purpose. It doesn't take millions or a plane ticket to Central America. It's in the small choices, listening to someone who feels unseen, giving your time to a cause that matters, valuing people for their kindness, not their bank accounts. If my journey resonates, support organizations like the Central American Youth Education Fund. Help kids like Anna reach the stars. But more than that, look at your own life. Who needs you to show up? What's stopping you from being the person you're meant to be? I'm heading to Sophie's school play next week, and maybe, just maybe, I'll plan a Thanksgiving with my grandkids. Not because I need to prove anything, but because I choose to. That's the freedom I've found, to live, to love, to build on my terms. Now go find yours. Before I dive back into my story, I want to send a big thank you for being here and letting me share my thoughts with you. Every moment we connect has a reason. There are no coincidences. So stick around a bit, you might discover something that speaks to your own journey. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button to catch all my latest stories.